There are things we need to mimic. There are things that we see within the environment that are to our benefit that we need to perhaps harness more completely than we do. Not just the cheapness of the material used, but the benefit of its use. The honeybees, their ability to use and to maximize the structure of a hexagon for the cells of a beehive. They maximize the space. They utilize the resources of the hive itself. The beehive frame that's already had a certain building of wax on it is to the benefit of the bees for future construction. It takes 5 times as much energy to create a pound of wax as it does a pound of honey. So if I can benefit by bringing to their use wax that they've already created from a previous season, it's to their benefit and growth. Let's look at the resources that we've been given, the bees, the locusts, and let's learn from them.
Before we go into the podcast, if you could just go and rate this show on whichever platform you're listening to it, it makes a huge difference to the podcast, the amazing conversations we get to have, and the incredible guests we're able to get on the podcast. So it's probably not something you would think about, but if you could just go rate the show, follow it, or share an episode, it does make a huge difference to the show. Thank you so much. In a world increasingly facing the challenges of climate change, with the Building Green podcast, we will dive deep into the intersection of architecture, design, urbanism, and environmental responsibility. I'm Ladina Schipf, your host. I've been an architect and building site manager for the past 10 years. During my studies at ETH in Switzerland, as well as in my working environment, I've had many touchpoints with sustainability, like many of you, I guess. I've also learned to question what I've been told, which is why I decided to go deeper into the topic and uncover what sustainability actually means. My mission is to highlight the transformative power of sustainable architecture, not just as a practice, but as a catalyst for broader societal change. Subscribe for more of our content and enjoy the show. Our future depends on how we organize society, but are we getting it right? My guest David Auge argues that we've been looking at it all wrong. In his book, Man's Search for Sustainability, he explores how honeybees and desert locusts, 2 extreme insect societies, hold surprising lessons for how we build our own communities. In this episode, David reveals why stress is essential for growth, how human society mirrors both the order of bees and the chaos of locust swarms, and why history and not just innovation is the key to designing a truly sustainable future. We also unpack the biggest misconception about sustainability and the one question everyone should ask to define their own why. This conversation will definitely change how you think about our society. David, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be a deeper topic about our society. But before we dive into your work specifically, let's go back. What's the earliest piece of context I need to know about you to fully understand the person that's in front of me today?
I graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point. And there are societies throughout the United States where individuals who graduated from West Point routinely meet, usually on a monthly basis of some sort. And we support one another in such meetings just by getting to know one another and supporting each other. Shortly after 9/11, November of 2001, I was in the Houston, Texas area, and there was a gathering of the greater Houston area West Pointers, and we had a speaker at that particular event. A speaker who, of course, this is slightly or just a short period of time after 9/11, who was an expert in Middle Eastern affairs. Now, I had been an engineer. I had currently been operating for about the past decade outside of the military, but I knew that at this time I might be called back up. I might find myself in the Middle East somewhere myself. This gentleman was trying to give us an update, an understanding of what that particular conflict was going to mean. And he started it out with the understanding that you could summarize the difference with 2 words. And he said those words are its history. It's history. He said in a Western mindset, whether European or in the United States, its history is used as a concept that it's irrelevant. It's history. It's not something we need to concern ourselves with now, because the world we have standing before us, the future that we have before us, is what we need to focus on, not the past. He said, in contrast, though, the situation you're going to find yourself in the Middle East doesn't see the word its history in the same light. He said its history in the mind of those individuals means the exact opposite. It means it is relevant. And that kind of opened up the idea of, I think sustainability, I think the concept of trying to communicate these things is brought to the floor by understanding that very same concept. You see, it's history, what we can learn from the past, what we can learn from a mimetic point of view provides us as sustainability experts, or in my case, a philosopher, with the groundwork from which to step forward and learn, as opposed to, well, it's just a bunch of raw materials, and it's from this point forward we need to concern ourselves. No, I think it's looking back into the past, seeing its history as relevant to this discussion.
Now, you've written a book called Man's Search for Sustainability. What is the book about?
Well, Man's Search for Sustainability is an effort to get the conversation about sustainability forefront in the minds of individuals who don't see it as a political hot potato, something to either be ignored or almost worshipped. It's an attempt to say, let's put up back on the table a discussion that can take us and the next generation into the future and into a logical and perhaps a robust discussion about what we have to learn and what we can learn from.
And what inspired you to write the book?
Well, going back to the fact that I found an unwillingness to look at this issue from anything but a political hot potato type of discussion, I found that we needed to present it in a more friendly, communicative fashion, as opposed to us, them. Let's look at two insect communities, two communities that seem to be sustainable on this planet, something that we can learn from the history that they have already provided us and how they are sustainable and in what ways they are sustainable.
That's so interesting. So before we look at the different societies that you looked at and that you learned from, what does sustainability mean to you? Is it more than just environmental responsibility? Does it also connect to purpose?
That's an excellent question. And it kind of gets to the very heart of this issue. Sustainability in many people's eyes is an endpoint. Oh, let's get to sustainability. But sustainability has more of a normative type of approach. It's like the word beautiful. It's a point upon which you can say something is more or less sustainable. What you're attempting to do is use a term that shows an improvement in the use of resources or the aspect of what we have to the best of all those that have to impact with it. So sustainability at first was just that. It was a normative concept. Something is more or less sustainable. Now we moved it to the point where, no, it's a destination. It's a point upon which we finally get to that point. I think that's a misnomer. I see it as a normative concept.
It's beautiful. So in the book, you compare two very different societies, the honeybees and the desert locusts. Can you walk me through how each of these societies works?
The two societies which I've chosen, the desert locusts and the honeybees, are on the spectrum of those that are most loved and most hated on the planet. The most loved is the honeybee, Apis mellifera. Honeybees are paramount to the pollination of plants across the entire world. They're necessary for agricultural development. People name so many things in a very friendly fashion after honeybees and bumblebees and, a soft, fuzzy little cartoon-like character in many people's imagination. In the United States, we have 26 states that have chosen that to be the insect of that state, even though it's found its way first from Europe and from Europe all the way into Africa. But they have chosen over here for that purpose. We even have a state flag in Utah that places the honeybee hive as the very center of it. So this particular insect has been elevated to a level of importance in society because of the way the insects deal with each other and their importance within society. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum is a desert locust. Now, a desert locust usually most people would identify with the biblical plagues of Egypt, where it was the eighth plague, totally destroyed the country of Egypt. And in history, it's continued to destroy the upper portion of northern Africa, decade and century and millennium after millennium. This insect requires a United Nations combined force in order to identify and control it. So if you had to look at an insect people want to get rid of, it would usually be the desert locust. Its impact is just monstrous. It's about 1/6 of the planet can be impacted by its existence, and it's devouring everything in sight. The honeybee, on the other hand, is something we'd like to promote. I actually have honeybee hives in my backyard. They're all over the place. They're promoted as something that we want to see continuing to grow and to prosper. So I took both of these communities saying, instead of saying one's good and one's bad, there's actually good and bad in both. And the generalization we thrust upon these two communities may be something that can start the conversation, because most people say, let's all be like honeybees. And let's not be like desert locusts. Well, no, there's much more here to learn from those two communities than just that.
And why do we love honeybees and why do we not like at all desert locusts?
Well, the honeybee seems to have a altruistic link to human society. We like honey. We like the propagation of all the different plants around the world because of them. And because of that, we say, let's get more honeybees. On the opposite end of the spectrum are desert locusts, which if a desert locust finds its way into the horizon of your particular country, you're going to be in a world of hurt. They devour pretty much everything in sight. Now, that's because we're looking at them as humans and what those communities do to us. But let's look at them separately. What does a honeybee within its own environment, within its own culture, impact upon each other? And the same thing with the desert locust. That's why my book looks at a total of 5 different things that we might learn from them. Like the first one is the management of stress. You see, the stress that finds its way into impacting the desert locust is beneficial. There's growth from stress. There's a strengthening of their very environment upon which first there's an excessive amount of growth in the food, the leaves, the foliage that they can eat. And then upon that, there's a congregation of these insects, and then eventually an explosion in their population. And that growth allows them to move out and continue to, in their case, consume and grow and take from the rest of that which is around them. Stress to them is a positive aspect for their growth. Now, stress for a honeybee, not so much so. There is a desire in their order to help their way through it. But stress is to the negative aspect of what honeybees have to actually contend with. And so as a beekeeper myself, I'm trying to minimize the stress that little Langstroth box, that small collection of bees have to confront.
Otherwise they leave, right? They're going to escape, yeah.
They're going to leave because that's one of their ways of having to make decisions and how to communicate. They'll leave if the queen within a honeybee hive finds herself in some way stressed to the point that she needs to move to a new hive or grow in some fashion. Now, you point something about leaving up that's important. Honeybees leave because they find the resource that they're in to not be adequate for their future home. Apis mellifera, the honeybee, will routinely swarm every spring. Right now it's February, it's usually March or April. The queen will kind of assess the size that she occupies with the rest of the hive, which is between about 20 to 30,000 bees. And if it's not enough, she will take 60% of that hive and leave. She will, just prior to that time, lay other eggs, which will turn into future queens. There's only one queen with that many bees. She will then take them. They'll go to a branch. They'll collect for 24 to 72 hours and then move eventually from there to a new home. It's the way one hive becomes two. It's a very orderly fashion. It's very disciplined. It's taking the older bees as opposed to the younger bees. So there's an age separation there that allows that young queen to develop. All of those, we as humans go, boy, that's the way to do it. Look at the order. Look at the discipline. But it's fragile too. That honeybee and the queen in their move will only have about a 60 to 70% chance of survival. And you've got to understand that is a risk that she has to take. Have you ever seen a swarm of bees hanging from a tree somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people are terrified when they see something. They're going, oh my goodness, they've gone crazy. No, they haven't. They're just trying to stay in that ball while a decision is being made between 24 to 72 hours as to where they're going to go next. Unfortunately, during that 24 to 72 hours, we're usually panicking as humans. We're like, oh my goodness, we've got 10,000 bees hanging on this tree branch somewhere. But that movement is actually within their own society an important one for that change. And it's the orderly way that they do it. In contrast, the locusts, they don't have a queen. They don't actually have a leader at all. One of the things you see in that society is that they're able to actually move forward through a chaotic interaction between all of the locusts that are present. And that's one of the reasons why there's a certain strength in both stress and work that they have to do and the decisions that are made. Now, can we learn something from that? Yes, we can. We can learn something from that. And it's that point of the two discussions that make it so that these aren't just black and white decisions. There are things that the locust does that actually help us to understand society itself.
Or what are locusts' strengths and weaknesses that we could learn from?
Well, one of the things that has in the life of a locust, and it actually just came up about 100 years ago, in 1921, there was Boris Yavarov. He was a Russian entomologist. He identified that the locust was actually a grasshopper, that under particular environmental conditions, the grasshopper becomes, and these are particular grasshoppers, there's about 10 different species on the planet. Under stress, they change their color, they change their strength of their legs. The brains actually increase in size by 30%. The stress actually is beneficial for this particular insect to grow in its ability to do much more than its previous or its predecessors could do. Many times we see stress as in our own society as humans as something to be discouraged, something to be pushed against, but not so with the locust, and maybe not so with us as well. Yes, there's a limit to how much stress we can have, but there is also a benefit to it as well. There's the point, that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger. That which doesn't find its way in my being in some way deterred actually strengthens my resolve to move forward. And that's something to really learn from. Ladina, the name of my book, Man's Search for Sustainability, is parallel to a book written by a gentleman called Viktor Frankl. And he was looking somewhat for that same strength in the persons that were able to survive the Nazi concentration camps in World War II. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian neurologist and psychologist. He founded what was eventually called the field of logotherapy, which has been dubbed the third Viennese school of psychology. Logotherapy developed in and through his experiences in Theresienstadt, which was a Nazi concentration camp. Now, Frankl spent a total of 3 years in 4 different camps during World War II: Theresienstadt, Auschwitz, Kaufering, and Turkenheim. Now, he lost his father in the Theresienstadt ghetto. His brother and mother were both killed at Auschwitz. His wife at Bergen-Belsen, and his sister was able to escape to Australia. What he did is find himself in the infirmaries, in the hospitals that were located within these concentration camps. And he had a chance working in those infirmaries to see individuals who held on to life to the very bitter end. You see, he was in this situation asking that very question. Why would these people want to see one more day of life? And he found out in there that there was 3 basic reasons that people seemed to want to continue, though their bodies were sick, they were racked with pain, though everything outside of that infirmary desired either to work them to death or to kill them. He found out that those individuals had one of three reasons. First was there was something or someone they needed to see, someone they wanted to embrace, their wife or their children or their parents in some way. The second group he found had something in them they wanted to produce. They wanted to write a sonnet. They wanted to play a musical instrument. They wanted to, paint a painting. There was something they felt in their artistic expression that needed to come out. And the third part, which is primarily the focus of his book, Man's Search for Meaning, was that in the third group, he found individuals who thought that there was a bigger story here than just what was happening at that moment. There was something that they were playing within the larger story that was driving them forward. That's where the locusts in particular come forward. There is something in the search that they seem to be having, given it's in their situation a push that comes from instincts as opposed to what humans do, but there was still a push there. A particular note, like for the locust, there is, and I point this out in the book, a search for the center. When locusts move forward, they're looking usually for the easiest way to move from one location to the next. Usually it's downwind or it's towards some type of pressure change, which indicates perhaps a greater amount of foliage and thus a greater opportunity for a diet. We can learn from that by seeing that continual searching for the center is something in which we're doing as well. Man's search for sustainability, what do we sustain, and why we sustain it, is critical to this discussion. And it's something from looking at locusts, we usually push to the side. We say, locusts, my goodness, let's just destroy those. Let's all be like honeybees, and the answer is solved. Well, no, there's something to be learned there as well.
What I take from this is we should analyze more what we have and try to work with that and not against it. Is that correct?
That would be a good way to do it, to look at what we have and not work against it. You've got an idea of what's called the paradox of the commons. Most people would say that what you're confronting in a lot of what you're pointing out is this idea that there's a limited amount of resources. Have you heard of the paradox of the commons?
No.
Okay, let me tell you that. Imagine a shared pasture where everyone is free to graze their cattle. It sounds ideal, right? Well, here's the catch. If everyone acts in a self-interested way, the pasture, let it be the air we breathe, the ground upon which we raise our foods, it eventually gets destroyed. Individuals acting independently according to their self-interest deplete that shared resource, even though it's clearly against everyone's long-term best interest. Why is this an issue? It challenges the notion that individual actions always lead to the best collective outcome. It highlights the need for regulations, for cooperation, to manage shared resources for sustainability. The paradox of the commons is we don't seem to do that. And one of the reasons why sustainability is usually placed on the table, because we say, that's what we need to do, is we need to have the regulations in place to be able to control what we're talking about. In many ways, that's the regulations that you would see with the honeybees. They're extremely ordered. They know exactly the size they need to have. They go beyond it. They control it. But then there's also the paradox of the invisible hand. These two paradoxes kind of contrast with one another. Once again, it has to do with people acting in a self-interested way. But yet somehow, in this self-interested way, society seems to benefit. For example, let's say there's a baker who bakes bread to earn a living. Not to feed the community. He's baking the bread for a very selfish reason. Yet by doing so, the baker then provides food for many. The paradox reveals a fascinating aspect of human behavior. It suggests that our ambitions can unintentionally benefit others, raising the question about the balance between the self-interest and societal good. Can we just rely on self-interest to drive progress? Or do we need the guiding hand to ensure fairness and sustainability? One would say, well, we need that guiding hand. The paradox of the common says that's what we need because of a limited resource. But the paradox of the invisible hand says there might be some unintentional benefit that we're not quite seeing. Anyway, these two communities, the bees and the locusts, kind of bring that to the forefront as well and open up, Ladina, this conversation so that it's not more than just good, bad. Okay, what's for lunch?
If you're enjoying the show, I have a small favor to ask that would mean the world to me. By rating and sharing the podcast, you're helping us grow and spreading our mission of making sustainability really desirable and cool to a wider audience. Besides of that, imagine impressing your colleagues with the latest insights on sustainable architecture. So make sure you follow the podcast and become the most informed in the room. Thank you so much for your support. So honeybees decide collectively and efficiently, and locusts react to scarcity. Now, what about human communities and cities? How do we work?
Well, we learn from both of those. There is the disciplined approach that you see in the honeybees that we can learn from. Do we always act logically? No, we don't, but we can learn something from that. Now, the bees, like you said, act in a scarcity, a collection that we would promote. Not completely. There's a forager aspect to the bees that people like to ignore. I have had beehives in my backyard, as many as 4. They will attack the beehive next to them if the defenses of the beehive are weak. They attack each other, not because they need more honey. I mean, they've already got their entire frames of of what they have currently in place full. There's almost I don't know what you would call it, a wickedness sometimes within these beehives and their willingness to do so because of the tendency they have to rob one another. Now, that's a bad part about the hives. That's a bad part about the honeybee, things that most people don't want to see. But if you go over to the locusts, there's a certain aspect of in their communication of emphasizing the eyes and the visual aspects of it. I mentioned their brains are 30% larger. That 30% growth in the brain of a grasshopper now having been transformed into a locust gives them an ability to measure the likelihood of their impact on others and those others on themselves as well. It's almost like you've got Facebook on steroids. These insects all of a sudden can see in every single different direction the social impact of what they're doing, and they go forward and they go back because of it. They also have a tremendous amount of fear of one another, too. There's a pacing. If you ever see a locust swarm actually in March before they get to what's called the 5th instar and have their wings and functioning, they are scared of each other, back and front. We can learn from it. Yes, it's good that they've got the eyes and the ears to be able to react to it. But also there's a fear in their options and their movements that we need to be aware of. So what do we learn from those? Well, we learn there's both negative aspects as well as strengths from both of them.
That's so interesting. And I think we also need to talk about what we could learn from them and what our ideal society would look like to get towards a more sustainable future, but also about how it actually looks like currently. Because it sounds to me a little bit like honeybees all work the same, locusts all work the same, and maybe in human society we have a mix of different mindsets, and that's what's holding us back at the same time then pushing us forwards to a better future.
I started off with a story concerning its history. Its history actually has to do with two ideas about how to see the world, and they come from Greek philosophy. Plato is perhaps the first person who came forward about mimesis. And so if you're going to divide the world into our differences and our different approaches to it, let's do it that way. Mimesis and poiesis. Mimesis, think of the word mimic. They believe that what we need to do is imitate the successes of nature. Art is an imitation of life. the idea of what we learn from what's around us gives us strength so that we may go forward. That particular point of reference and discussion has been the primary way for centuries that we would interact with the society and the nature around us. Poiesis, Ladina, is something that has been thrust upon us, I think, in the last 100 years. That's the fact that all you have is a bunch of raw material. We just need to build it the right way and then just go forward. And we forget about the past. We forget about the balance. We forget about the lessons that may be right there for us to grow from. So how do we learn and go into the future? Perhaps we look more toward the past and less toward the raw materials that are inventing something from scratch into the future. Or perhaps we use both, but we don't divorce ourselves.
Now, if we look at this, go deeper into this with the lens of architecture and urban planning in mind, how can these lessons from bees and locusts help us design better cities or communities?
Well, as an architect, you're probably very familiar with leadership and energy and environmental design. I too have that similar certification, and I've had a chance over the years to look at and to get a chance to wrap my arms around just the benefits of building some type of structure that's going to last for more than 20 to 50 years. The positioning of that, the use of natural light, the use of natural resources, the minimization of energy demand and water demand on that particular piece, and the benefits that if you use a brown field as opposed to a green field, and your audience would know, of course, that means a piece of property that's already been disturbed may even contain some type of contaminant within the soil that needs to be remediated before the construction begins. All of those are looking at the past to a certain degree and into the future so that we can construct something that will last long term. Those are benefits that I think attempt to take the raw materials we have and then look forward. And if, Ladina, do you have your LEED AP certification?
No.
Okay. I remember going through the testing and the training classes prior to receiving or being tested so I could receive such a certification. And there was a lot of history in there where they said these buildings constructed in the 15th or even the 12th century were still in use. They didn't have the mold buildup or the lighting impacts because of the forethought of the architects in that time frame to put something in place that was going to be a benefit to the surrounding community. That's something to learn from here, using that history then to put something in place now and bring it into the future.
So if we detach sustainability from going green and instead look at it as a philosophy or a philosophy of long-term balance in nature, in societies, in personal lives, how can we do that?
Well, perhaps it's to just look into the past, to take a mimetic point of view and say there are things we need to mimic. There are things that we see within the environment that are to our benefit that we need to perhaps harness more completely than we do. Not just the cheapness of the material used, but the benefit of its use. One of the things I liked in the LEED building construction, where I've had a chance to work, is the fact that you need to find building material from 500 miles or less from the construction site itself. Now, that promotes the construction nearby long term, because then you help those industries nearby to continue to produce the necessary building materials that are beneficially created for something in their general region. That would probably be more like the idea, once again, of the honeybees. You know, their ability to use and to maximize the structure of a hexagon for the cells of a beehive. They maximize the space. They utilize the resources of the hive itself. And when I want to go and put in a new frame, that it will. We use the term that it's been worked out. The beehive frame that's already had a certain building of wax on it is to the benefit of the bees for future construction. It takes 5 times as much energy to create a pound of wax as it does a pound of honey. So if I can benefit by bringing to their use wax that they've already created from a previous season. It's to their benefit and growth.
So if we zoom out, why do you think humans strive for sustainability? Is it about survival, responsibility, or something deeper?
Well, it goes back to the idea, is it a normative concept or is it an end goal in itself? If it's normative, which is what I think it is, then it's to the very benefit of all of us. We have to make decisions and do so on a day in and day out basis about the resources available and their use. Something more sustainable is a more efficient use of what's been given to it, been given to us.
And that's kind of our purpose in life, to get better every day, to get more efficient.
To get more efficient or to be wise of the resources around us. Ladina, last week I spent the week in Peru. I was in the Andes Mountains and I was at an elevation of between 3,000 meters to approximately 4,000 meters in elevation. So these were very, very tall mountains. One of the things I found in those communities was a lot of potatoes. A potato grows well at that elevation. And as a result, most of their diet focused on the use of that particular food for their growth. Now, they had other foods as well, but they had, in order to be sustainable, kind of balanced their diet upon the use of potatoes, and were wisely doing so. They didn't look for apples or pears or other types of fruits that needed a much lower elevation. They did it, and they were able to sustain themselves with potatoes. They had other food as well, but I mean, I was amazed at how much potatoes seemed to show up meal after meal after meal.
And how many different things you can actually do with the same resource, with the same potatoes, right?
Exactly.
So sustainability is often framed as a battle against inefficiency, resistance, or short-term thinking. What's the biggest challenge you have faced in advocating for sustainability?
The biggest, and I'd have to go back to the fact that I've spent 35 years working for industry in this field of sustainability. Usually it's, well, we've always done it that way before. There's a resistance to change and a resistance to the knowledge that there are more efficient opportunities coming to us to the forefront. It sounds like I'm switching horses, going to the poiesis part of it, but still to learn the fact that let's learn how to use this resource more effectively than we have in the past. I have found that the discussion is the difficulty, Ladina. That discussion of willingness to change is perhaps the most difficult thing I've had to deal with.
So on one hand, you're saying we should look for better solutions. And on the other hand, you're saying we should look to the past and see how we use what we already have.
Yes, I guess so. Just like the lead AP, let's look to the past of how you build or construct a building and have constructed it. So in the future, we can use the lessons for that very purpose. The daylights, the necessary aspect of sunlight getting into a building. My goodness, you can learn so much from what was constructed between the 12th and the 15th century, because they really didn't have available to them, the lighting that we have now, the electrical lighting we have. So they had to think through that. What we can do now, the same in the future.
Yeah, and about structure, how to optimize material. I mean, there's huge churches in Europe that are enormous and still built very efficiently with the least material available because it's all done by hand. And now we're getting kind of comfortable with all the machines we have, all the material we have available from all over the world. So, David, in your eyes, what's the biggest misconception people have about sustainability?
I'd have to go back to the idea that it's an end goal. We're finally sustainable. No, it's a normative term. You're going to continue to have to look at the word and the concept day in and day out for your entire life. What is a sustainable? And this might sound a little silly, but as you can tell from my white hair, I'm not the youngest person on the block. The best home for me and my family when we were growing up would be something that's 1, 2, 3 stories tall. Something compact, uses energy efficiency from going from story or floor to floor. As you become older, you need a ranch style building. So what's more sustainable for me in the life that I'm going to live now that I'm an older man? Well, I don't need to go from floor to floor to floor. I need to look at a home that's more sustainable for my wife and I. And that would be something where stairs are kind of not the norm.
And you've studied sustainability at a very macro level, looking at those societies. What's one personal habit or belief that has changed your approach to balance and purpose?
At the macro level, I would say it's the continual change of the concept of sustainability as a normative term. What do you want to sustain? I thought that Viktor Frankl kind of put his ideas on the table well. What was the justification for these individuals to want to see another day? And I think what he found, and as I do myself, that there's a bigger picture we're a part of than we might think. And that would be the normative term about how do we fit into this? How are we of benefit to the society in which we live? I routinely, usually a couple times, if not more a year, am part of a cleanup crew that goes up and down the highway cleaning up garbage that other people have thrown out of the window. I find that to be a benefit to those individuals that are in the area. But I also feel it's my responsibility, because if you really care about this, then pick up the garbage, but pick it up for somebody else. Find yourself being a larger benefit than just to your own selfish needs. Make it selfless in that regard.
That's beautiful. I came into this conversation expecting to learn about honeybees and how societies work, but I feel like I'm leaving with a deeper appreciation for our purpose, our life. What's one thing you hope listeners walk away thinking about differently today?
Let's look at the resources that we've been given, the bees, the locusts, and let's learn from them. And let's analyze them. Let's get to the general principles that we can learn from them and then apply. Let's go through those 3 steps. Look closely, analyze, and then apply. Is
there any strength or weakness from those 2 societies that we haven't talked about?
I think that a quote that I think I stole from Viktor Frankl would be something that is brought forth in both of these communities. And he says a man or a woman who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. If there's a why, and that sustainability is a why, what do we want to sustain? What do we want to see taken to the next generation? If we have that why, then we can bear anyhow, whatever confronts us, whatever difficulties or challenges, and not just to say, oh, how can we handle this? Well, maybe this is a chance for us to really shine.
Maybe the problem is that sustainability is such a big word that it cannot be a why. And maybe everybody listening should take a moment now and do this exercise of breaking down what sustainability means to them and what is their specific why that gives them the purpose.
In the book I've written, I include a few appendices. And one of the appendices is the 3rd one, where there's a man who found himself, he's a Catholic priest, a Polish Catholic priest, who found himself in Auschwitz in 1942, I believe, and was confronted with the fact that his life was being used up as most of the other ones were in that area. Someone was to go to what was called a death box and eventually die. And he sacrificed his life. He actually stepped forward and says, why don't you take my life instead of the individual who's right here? And they did. And that man died in that particular box. It's a wonderful story if you get a chance to read it. And it brought to the very forefront that he felt his life could best be sustained or useful in its death for another person. And that person was able to tell that story later on. He eventually did survive Auschwitz. That's perhaps where I come to the very forefront. It's not about me. There's a bigger story out here than just my life and my existence. Let me give it for something bigger than that.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful ending to our conversation, David. So if our listeners want to follow your work, where can they find you?
I have currently just one book written, and I'm preparing a second one, but it's called davidaugébooks.com. My last name is Auge. So if you want to, Ladina, put that into the listing of what that would be from, that would be appreciated. It's also a book that's on Amazon, Man's Search for Sustainability.
I will definitely link that in the description and also on the website of the podcast on buildinggreenshow.com. I always add the guests' book recommendations, and I will definitely put it there too. Thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure talking to you. A huge thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to the podcast to support me and so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, I'd also be so grateful if you could rate and review us. If you have any guest suggestions or any feedback, you can find me on the socials at Ladina Schipf. Thanks.